Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first episode of the Interpreter Hub. My name is Mark Rockford. For those of you who don't know me, I have been in this industry for quite some time. I have been accused of being pro interpreter by companies, more than one. I have been accused of being pro company by interpreters, also more than one. But the thing you'll quickly find out about myself is that I really care about people. We're all in this together. I see this as an industry of many puzzle pieces that have to fit together to make everything work the way it's supposed to do. And we are here at Interpreter Hub to create a community where people understand that, empower you with the data you need, empower you with a lot of other tools, professional development, and whatnot, and also entertain you. The point of this podcast is to bring everything to you in a fun, entertaining, understandable way and allow you to ask your questions to our guests. Now, Mateus, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I'm Mateus Freitas. Most of you guys already know me from Interpreter Hub. There is just one rule here. Do not call me Fritas. I know my name sounds like Fritas, but Fritas in Portuguese is French fries. Not a nice name at all. So Freitas, please, Mateus, anything you want. Just don't say Fritas.
I think we just got you a nickname, man. We're going to call you French fries.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. It's impossible, man. We cannot do that.
You fell into the trap.
Oh, I set the trap for myself. That's the worst part. All right, there's not much to talk about me already. I think most of the people in our community already know what I do here. I started Interpreter Hub to help you, interpreter on the other side of the screen right now, to empower you, give you the resources to thrive. And I am very excited and happy to have such amazing people here. Mohamed, Mark, these guys are awesome. So take benefit of everything they have to share here. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and also to send this video to every interpreter you know. Mohamed, who are you? What are you doing here?
All right. I did not expect I would have to introduce, but I'm Mohamed. I have been an interpreter for quite some years myself, and I don't interpret anymore as much. And essentially, I currently run Lnterprepedia, amongst a few other jobs besides that we're not going to get into. But that's it, honestly. If we're talking about who might know me and who might not. If we're talking interpreters, many of the people here would know me. Other than that, I don't think I show up very often.
Mohamed, can you hire me?
We're going to dig into that. Yeah. I mean, you're going to have a lot of people that are looking you up on LinkedIn and other websites, right? So we're definitely going to dig into that.
I try to be hidden.
No,
yes.
not anymore.
So he won't be giving us his personal address, right? So don't expect that, everyone. I want to be clear. Mohamed is an interpreter. His working languages used to be Arabic and English, right? He's a man of many hats, lots of talents, right? And we will be diving into lots of different questions. Take it away.
All right. Ask away.
Okay, so the first topic that we have to talk about here, Mohamed, very important thing. A lot of people want to know that. How did you get your first job? How did you get into interpreting? How did you find this universe?
This is going to be a fun one. So, how do I say this without... Okay, so essentially, I graduated a completely irrelevant field. I'm a civil engineer by graduation. But in my country, which is Egypt, I was doing what every other fresh graduate, or, well, at the time I wasn't even graduated, is doing to find a job. I was just looking up Facebook groups everywhere I could look. LinkedIn wasn't a big thing at the time. And I noticed the pay wasn't very good for engineers. And just off the corner of my eye, I saw something that paid at the time 2.5 as much.
Whoa.
For the maximum I've seen. And all the requirements were being a bilingual. So I applied and, well, the rest is history, essentially. I just went to a company. They trained me for a little over a month. And after that, I just worked as an interpreter in the office, but it was remote, which is something not many people are familiar with. I had to physically go to work, but I was a remote interpreter. The idea of work from home didn't get more popularized in that entire industry in Egypt until around COVID.
That's nice. Interesting.
Those are good points. So literally, there was nothing stopping you from joining if you spoke fluent English and fluent Arabic, correct? There was no other barrier to entry.
The only two requirements are just being bilingual. Like, there's nothing else. I mean, there were like obviously if you could speak another pair, but it just had to be a pair that's in demand.
And how was your
Very good.
training? Like, was it good? How you mentioned that it lasted for 1 month, right?
To be very honest, the only thing that I would say with grace about that first experience is that the training was worth every second. I
It was paid.
barely made it. It was not. Actually, it was paid, but I wouldn't call it paid anymore. But I got some money out of
Yeah.
it. Yes.
But like talking about the training when we were like learning to interpret, what was the most difficult aspect that you found in your journey learning to interpret first?
So I feel like not many people would relate to me on this one, but
Mhm.
when I applied, they did state that a medical background would actually be a plus. So most people would just completely skip that job offer. Having no such thing was fine by me because I saw, a big number. I was like, yeah, let's go. And during the training, I was the only non-medical background among all of my peers.
Oh,
So I had some very interesting experiences because I didn't know the names of any organs besides the most obvious
yeah.
ones. So I made some horrendous mistakes on during the training where I was made fun of so hard that
Ah,
my
my
trainer
brain
took
hurts. My
me.
brain hurts. Not that bad.
Yeah, but the brainer outright took me from the training hall to another location where they taught English and asked me to repeat what I just said. It was that bad for me compared to my peers. So that was the most challenging, but I don't think many people relate because most people try to have the medical background first. But yeah.
What made you stick it out then, right? Because I mean, you're learning a new field. You're learning terminology you don't know. Is it just that financial motivation, or why were you like, hey, I'm not going to give
So
up on this?
first, financial motivation, absolutely. Second, I had already worked in a call center job like when I was younger in college. And so every single time I went to try to have like a training in my actual field, I really just hated the whole environment because in my country, we're not really rewarded for being engineers as much. Some people might relate who are listening to this podcast where certain fields, very prestigious fields, just don't resonate well if you know a thing or two about the outside world.
Yes.
While on the other hand, I also really like the environment of international companies. So that's one. Two, obviously the financial aspect, even though if I even tell you how much it was, it's not even a number anyone would want to accept. Not none of the languages I've ever hired has ever seen a number like this, nor should they. And I'm talking all across the ladder. So it's
Well,
very, very
that's an
small, but compared
interesting
to
thing, but
Egypt,
yeah,
it's good.
compared to your other opportunities though, like it was good
It
enough to
was
get
much better.
started, and there
Who
was
were
no. I mean,
engineers?
you're talking about a paid training, right? You're talking about a new industry that you can get into with more
I felt rich.
financial. Yeah, I mean, you may or may not like. I don't know the Egyptian culture, right? You might have still been living with your parents. Who knows, right? But if
Yeah,
if if that was enough to survive, and you could get hired immediately as opposed to spending months looking for an engineering job that paid way less and maybe worked more hours, right? Like that doesn't sound like a bad deal to get started.
absolutely not. I mean, even today, so like now that people, especially after COVID, everybody knows about this industry in Egypt at least. And so today, even though the knowledge is there, so people are aware of like what's a normal number to acquire, even what's the limit, etc., it is still quite low for the regular market, but completely blows out of the water anything else in that entire culture. Like an engineer today would still get about like the interpretation job would pay about 1.8 times the minimum for a civil engineer. And I'm not talking entry, because entry engineers don't get a job.
You go to
You
college.
have to go
Crazy.
free for a while and like beg your way into a lot of places. I'm talking about someone 3 years worth of civil engineering experience.
Wow. Well, let's focus back on the interpreting field, right? So obviously, you got your training. You stayed at that company for I don't know, you can tell us how long you stayed for. And then what made you leave? What made you look for other opportunities? And what were those other opportunities?
Very good question. I stayed there for a year and a half, which it was just, I left the day we got something called the profit share. So if you stay in that company for a year, you're given an allotted profit share, which just translated to 2 months' pay. But my first 6 months, I wasn't entitled those because I started the middle of the year. So I waited until the exit point to get those because I couldn't handle it anymore. As for when I left, there was nothing on my mind other than the fact that, like, it wasn't humane by the time I left. The entity I worked for, the job at the start, don't get me wrong, the job is amazing. It pays way better than everywhere else. You love it, you're more motivated. But over time, when it becomes a 9 to 5,
Gets stressful.
and you understand just the exhaustion of it, etc., and it does start to take on the toll, I felt like I wasn't being paid enough, and I left and,
Right.
well,
Well, I mean,
moved
your
to
health
other
and your
things.
well-being has to come in, right? Like I've heard certain call centers, I'm not going to mention any names, like compared to orange juice factories, right? Where they literally squeeze all the juice out of you, the
Yes.
orange, right? In order
Absolutely.
to get everything they can. You know, is that a fair assessment? Is that
That's
happening
an
nowadays?
understatement. Like, just for context, so I spoke to Matthias about this
Mm-hmm.
before,
Yes.
and I was telling him like the entity I worked in was similar to one that they have in his country, and he was telling me, yeah, it was equally bad, etc. I was like, I had to physically go to work, 5 hours of transportation back and forth. I'm not getting paid for this because and it's not 5 hours because the distance is long. It's 5 hours because I'm using transportation in Egypt, right? And when a supervisor is, telling you you're doing something wrong in this job, all you're getting is an email, maybe a phone call. In my case, this was someone standing next to me, and I assure you, in our culture, it's perfectly fine to do stuff that are not okay in others. So we were getting deductions left and right. I don't think I had a
You
full
mean
salary
pay
ever.
deductions? Like financial
Oh, yeah.
punishments?
That's
Oh,
crazy.
yeah. Like, quality was not done to keep us performing better. It was done to keep us from getting our paycheck. It's the only reason.
Crazy.
That's crazy. So not only are you at a pay level that you didn't love, right? I mean, you obviously started the job really wanting it, but
Yeah.
now you're getting deductions from your pay in order
And we're not
to,
talking
I'm
like a
assuming, to be
day or
more
two.
profitable, right? For the,
There
the company
were,
itself. Wow.
yeah,
I
it
do have to
was
jump in here and say
20%
real
at
quick,
times.
Mohammed, like, I want to make clear none of us are against companies, right? We are all for
Yeah.
excellent companies. Companies are here to make profit in the industry, in every industry, right? Like, what is a company's job? Make money. At the end of the day, how's it going to make money? Providing the services that it chooses to provide. In our industry, it is using interpreters, right? So they want to make money. They want to provide, hopefully, a good quality service. We'll take that as a given. We can get into that in another episode, but that just because we are pro company and pro interpreter doesn't mean we're pro every company and pro every
Yeah.
interpreter, right? Like
True.
there's always good stuff and bad stuff, and every company is going to have some strengths and some weaknesses where they can improve. Just like every interpreter is going to have some strengths and possibly some weaknesses where they can improve, right? Is there anything you want to touch on there, Mohammed?
I mean, there's one very basic thing that every interpreter knows. If I talk to any interpreter anywhere, as long as they've worked in more than one place, I'm not talking about, me 7 years ago. I'm talking about someone who left one place and moved to just one more, nothing more, just the experience of moving to two. And you ask this person, do you think company X is a good company? You can almost always get an answer, at least not from the interpreter, but it rises to the top of their head. If you name a company and just say X, Y, Z, or whatever, there's almost always a proper, not almost unanimous answer. And that is not because of bias or whatever. It's genuinely because, is this company making the people feel that it's a good company, or is it not? On the other hand, obviously there's the ungrateful people, but I'm not. including them here.
Well, right. And I mean, I got to be clear again, speaking from having been in both perspectives, right? Having worked for companies, multiple again, plural, that hired interpreters, you don't ever want to tell the company, I hated that company, right? As a professional view, you want to say, well, I'm searching for better opportunities. I'm looking for something. The financial remuneration is better over here, right? Always talk positively about your past experiences whenever possible, because the way you speak about them is the way that we think you're going to speak about us, right?
But that's
Whether that is professionally, personally, etc. So, pro tip. So, obviously, you're not with that company and you're not with the second company. You actually have your own company, Mohammed. What caused you to create your own company?
the first and the second, essentially. I just extrapolated. I The thing is, I have ADHD, right? I mean, it's almost 15% of the population at this point. So, and most people believe they have it. I did get a diagnosis, and I realized very simply that I'm not very good at following what people ask me to do. As you can see, like everyone here is in a proper setting, right? You have an office, you have headsets, you have a microphone. I'm on my couch holding my phone because intentionally removed my office from the picture. If I'm going to sit and work for 16 hours, I want to do it at my own terms. And so when I was working, I have worked for company ABC. I've worked, I think, at this point for like 10 interpretation companies. Technically, I've started two, but I don't count the first. And I learned only one thing from all of this. I don't do well taking orders from others, but I do much better when I feel like what I'm doing is efficient. And oftentimes, efficiency gets lost to profit. And I hate that. I just couldn't handle it. And I noticed, like, I went to my very first company's account manager. I was like, hey, so you guys have a problem with ABC? And I feel like if you do blah blah blah, and it's just everybody's so stuck and rigid in their own beliefs. And I was like, you can make more money and keep everybody happy. All you have to do is listen. And many years later, nobody's listening. I decided maybe I should be the one talking.
That is awesome. So, what are you doing a little bit differently in your own company to keep that, let's say, flexibility, that respect for the person, right? And I don't know if those are your only two focuses, right? I'm sure you want to make money as well, right? But what are you doing different? Where's the opportunity?
So, first of all, my interpreters, everybody in Lnterprepedia knows this. It's the ground rule. It's if I don't talk to you and you don't talk to me, we're doing well. So I realized as
No
an
news is good
interpreter,
news.
Yes.
exactly, no news is good news, but also one more important thing. Everybody knows I run the company solo. There's no staff, no employees, nobody, no accountants. I'm doing everything A to Z. Obviously, there's a lawyer, but I'm not gonna go learn law. Like I don't want to go that far. And so I told everybody, every time you interact with me, if I'm more than capable to help you, then sure. But if you're asking me to help you with something that you can help yourself, you're saving me time, you're saving yourself time, you're saving yourself an interaction with me, which allows me to work harder for everybody else. And so the first thing I did was establish that yes, no news is good news, but also the more time you let me do my stuff, the more time I can help you. And I intentionally established ways to showcase this to my employees, which is, for an example, on months where people actually let me be, I pay early. I know this sounds dumb. It's very, very simplistic, but I make it very crystal clear in that email. Like, all right, everybody let me be this month. I had a good time. I worked. I did everything I need to do. I actually had enough time to prepare the payment early this month, which is like early compared to like the set schedule. So it's not like I'm gonna be late or anything. Also, a very, very important thing is when I was an interpreter, even for I don't think there's been a company where I worked as an interpreter where I didn't put like 12 to 16 hours a day in. I didn't need a supervisor. Actually, the only time I didn't was when I had one. So I told everybody in the company, work however much, however little you want, whenever you want. Don't work when you don't want to. In fact, if you don't want to, you don't have to tell me. And when I gave everybody that list of freedom, all I found is people were working more, better. In fact, what's very, very ironic is I had people do much more productivity during the period where I completely shifted away from like, so I had some clients who required specific number of hours. At the very beginning, you had to, take whatever you can get. So I didn't choose who I could get, but over time, I started getting better clients. And the clients who allowed more flexibility, once I told my interpreters, you can do what you want, I got more money.
Interesting.
And I'm talking like 30-40% more.
We'll dig into that. That's awesome. But this
Yeah.
just let's be honest. This sounds too good to be true, right? So how are you? What systems do you have in place? Yeah, of course, because there are really good people, and there are people that will take advantage of you, right? There's
Hmm.
people in between probably too, but those are the two extremes that we're all aware of, right? So, how are you making sure? What systems do you have in place? Do you have proprietary technology? Are you using? You don't have to name any other tech, but like, are you using some kind of technology to track all of that?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. So the reality isn't that it's, while yes, it's too good to be true. You're talking to me 4 years in, so I already created all the tools that allow me to work less over these 4 years by iteration.
Well, no,
So
not
like,
you, the interpreter, right? Because I'm
huh?
assuming you're hiring people every week, right? Because you continue to grow. You're a company, a company that stagnates is a company that dies, right? So you want more clients, you want more interpreters, right? Which we're going to give you a plug in a second. But how do you make sure that those interpreters are not taking advantage of you? Because there are people that if you let them would sit there every day, all day long, and not take a single call, right?
Huh? I
So
mean, you pay them well, and by well,
That's
there's a
dedicated.
very specific condition on well here.
Yeah.
Um, the interpreters who apply to work for me, I obviously, like, I get a CV, I get what the person is expecting, etc. I'm not going after somebody who's like, I want the world. Like, there is a market rate, and that's what I'm looking to hire for, because I'm gonna hire someone who's going to be happy with the rate I'm capable of offering, and those people exist in a good amount. But I'm also making sure that almost everyone in the company knows I'm offering them almost all the money, because I don't make my profit by reducing the rates of everybody. Because don't get me wrong, I can. Obviously, if I reduce the rate just X amount, I'm instantly making more money. But the reality is, more people are going to leave. I have people all the way back from 4 years ago who never left. Some of them, their ID number is older than mine. So they've joined the client I work with before I did. And then they migrated for a reason or another. It's just they understand that I'm offering them everything I have except for a very small profit margin, because I don't make money by, 10
making it
interpreters.
others.
Yeah, I make money, and I make it clear, but by offering you an opportunity to work, and I'm taking a very small slice, but from a large amount of
Hmm.
people. I don't want to make, like, sure, I can make $100,000 in 1 month and then go out of business, but why?
I mean, your Lamborghini payments probably take quite a bit
Yeah.
of your salary, right?
It
Insurance.
will, but I don't like them, so we're fine.
Hi, Mohamed. I have a question for you. I don't know if I'm still here because it seems like I'm having some connectivity issues here hosting the podcast. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yep, we're
Yeah, we
good.
can.
All right, Mohammed. The question is, a lot of people they were asking you about the company and how you started everything. So, can you think about the initial challenges that you had, like the first or second challenge that were really intense and important to get you where you are right now, and you had to overcome these challenges? How you made it?
So there's two very main and important challenges. One is just going to be always the case, and the other has been born very recently that I didn't have as hard, but it's now a challenge. The first one, which is the main one, is getting through the door. Just being able to sit across the table from someone who believes you have something to offer and then giving you a chance to offer it. So getting your first client is just the most difficult first challenge. Even if you have a perfectly, like even today in my current conditions and with the whole system in place, with the resources to
Mm-hmm.
cover half of the market if I actually get a chance, if I reach out to a client A, B, or C, I don't always get a reply. So imagine back then, right? So that's the first biggest challenge. The new one that has started to actually become more challenging, that it even occasionally reaches to me, is credibility. So the market is saturating by people trying to create entities. And I'm not talking entities like outright companies, I'm talking on a more smaller scale, like people essentially trying to start out without getting the nitty gritty details and actually becoming an official incorporated entity. And so these people suffer greatly with credibility. Even if someone is credible, it's very hard to establish it when everyone is stating they are.
Yeah, let's dig in there because when you started Interprepedia, I don't know what the landscape looked like exactly, right? But there weren't a whole ton of, let's call you a third party provider, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
there are the LSPs who are typically the companies in the United States or Europe, right, where there are laws that mandate interpretation, right? People have to have access to the services. And those companies are the ones with the direct clients that are the hospitals, the schools,
Mm-hmm.
the law firms, you know, immigration, et cetera, right? So they're the ones they're going after those big clients. Your clients are those LSPs, right? So you're providing services to the language companies that need more interpreters. And yeah, there's always been some saturation in the LSP, but what you're saying now is that the saturation is also happening, and I see this every day on LinkedIn. I agree with you in the third party provider for those LSPs, right?
Third, fourth, fifth, God knows what they are now. Like there's subcontractors to the subcontractors to the subcontractors, and it's
Which is
getting a little
crazy. They
wild,
all take their percentage, right? And so the interpreter at
which
the
is
end of
less
that
pay for
chain,
everybody.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. So, I mean, why would you? So, I will tell you, having had my own company as well and having worked for others, I've never worked for a third party. I had my own LSP in the United States, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so I've had to use third party providers such as your company, right? We have no, I will say disclaimer, I did not work with Interprepedia. I did not use them as a third party. That's one of the reasons we wanted to have
True.
Mohamed on, right? Because there's no relationship and so it's completely unbiased.
Yes.
But, right, so you guys, what's the value or like why did you want to start the company compared to like where you see other people at, right? Because people think it's easy. I'm just going to start a company and I'm going to get a bunch of interpreters to work for me. Awesome. Sounds very simple, right? What I will say that you're not taking into consideration is the client side, which Mohammed touched, getting your clients. That is obviously a challenge. And then also dealing with people is the other challenge, which, you know, to summarize what you said, it sounds like you're taking advertised rates and getting people that are happy with them. So that's how you're dealing, keeping your people happy is clear, transparent communication. I pay X, they want X, it all works out, right? Why do you think so many people are jumping into your market?
When you say my market, are you referring to like
Third
to work
party.
for me or
Nope,
uh-huh.
third party.
So
Creating your
Yeah.
there's a very
competition.
simple reason,
Why?
but 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 the reality isn't that. So the reason is simple, but the branches of why it's simple are a little annoying. So if interpreter A, let's me for an example, I'm an Arabic interpreter. If I want a job today, I already have a list off the top of my head of companies that are hiring almost at all times for certain languages. If I apply to all of them, the reality is they're saturated with applicants. And no matter how good an applicant you are, if you're very far down the queue, they'll never get to you before they're done with their vacancies. It is not about I'm better or etc. There's at this point where the market is just supply and demand for most things, if you're getting much later into applying for company A, B, or C, by the time their vacancy runs out, you're going to be put on hold for the next time, and then the next time, and then the next time. So if I'm an interpreter who can't find a job at company A, B, or C that I want, but I found out that, oh, there's this third party that also hires for company A, B, and C. So now I get to be in multiple queues. And that's most of the reason why people come to this market. It's I'm unable to enter this company directly because of multiple reasons. Either you're just way too far down the queue, which is not the actual common reason, but one of them. The actual common reason is if I'm applying, some companies just they're too large. They use the ATS applicant tracking systems, which automatically just completely, rejects a candidate before they
Knockout
get to be
questions.
seen
Yep.
by a human. Meanwhile, I'm a third party. I make money for every hired person. It doesn't matter like how good, how bad, how horrible their CV is. I see a CV with my own eye and decide, was this written by a person or was this just something like I make humane based judgments, and then that allows me to get people that would otherwise be skipped by a system.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that makes sense for the interpreter. But back to my original question is why are they
Sorry.
jumping in as your competition, right? So there's Interprepedia
Oh,
today,
the
and
entities.
and now
Huh.
another, another interpreter who's been here 7 years, 4 years, 2 years, or not at all, right? They just see there's an opportunity to create an interpreting company, and they jump in, and now you've got language third party provider A and B, C, D, alpha, beta, gamma, all the way down, right? Because there's a ton of them. I see all of them popping up on
I
LinkedIn, and they're
misunderstood you.
all
I get you
hiring.
now.
Yeah. So why is your particular why are you getting so much competition with Interprepedia? Why are people jumping in there?
So if you worked for any third party, by default, if client A, let's call them client A, if they pay X and they have a third party and that third party hires for that client, they're guaranteed to either pay X minus whatever, or in very rare occasions, significantly farther away. Sorry, not very rare. Most occasions, much farther down the line. Sorry, I reversed it. And so most people who were exposed to working to a third party or worse, fourth and etc. So people even further down the line, they always get into interactions with other interpreters who work for the direct client. And so if you know that, this person's getting X, I'm getting X minus whatever, the reality is you ask yourself, well, then it's definitely that the third party is making the difference. Why can't I do that? This is what people believe, and that's how they start. And what's making it worse is that some people who run it aground, so to speak, like completely make offers that, the offers you see people complaining about on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Let's make
Some
up
of
some
these
Yeah, I've
fake
people
heard
stay.
about
numbers.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's make up some fake numbers, right? Just to give this some explanation. Let's say that you work for Interprepedia and you're going to make. I'm just going to make these up. These are not real. You're going to make $100 an hour, right?
All right.
Mohammed's charging 110, 10% markup. Not true.
Mhm.
This is fake. Just want to remind you of that, right? So what you're saying is the company that competes with you says, oh, well, I can charge 110 too. Charge 110, but they don't want to pay 100. They want to pay 30. They want to take
Yes,
the vast majority for themselves, right?
which works for a while, but not a very long one.
I mean, what kind of interpreters can you get? I mean, you get beginner interpreters, you'll get people who will take it like your first experience, right?
Exactly. There's people for every job, sadly.
Well, not sadly. I mean, it was what was a good opportunity for you
Yeah.
7 years ago is not a good opportunity for you today, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what I want people to understand. That's why I asked the barrier to entry questions.
When I
Nothing's
said it
stopping
in
you.
that manner, I meant it as such a way that so there are people for every job. The sad part isn't that those people exist; it's that they're being taken advantage of.
I
So
mean, do you
there
feel
is a
you were taken
difference.
advantage of in your first position?
I definitely was, but it was a fair market. That is not what I'm referring to. So it's different. I was getting paid 3 times what an engineer is in my country, right? But if I'm applying right now, as you stated, Mohammed's paying the interpreter $100 an hour. If I go to a company and they're paying 90, this is just competition. Sure, it's worse, but it's competition. It's a 10% difference. But if you go somewhere and they're paying 20, and you know that this is paying 100, this is not the similar. This is outright taking advantage of somebody's lack of knowledge. It is different. There is a rate that is almost fair, where this is supply and demand rate. But there is a rate where, no, I know you're hiring local people from the country and you're abusing their lack of knowledge about the market. And those people do get the job, get happy like I was. And then 5 months, 6 months in, they learn more about it and leave and go somewhere else. The reality is their chain of supply will never end because they're looking at local talent, and local bilinguals will never get 20 from any other job in their surroundings.
I got a question. I don't
100%.
know if you can hear me still, but the question here is, why do you feel like every interpreter now says that they are being underpaid? Do you think that this is an effect that you can see around LinkedIn as well? Because in my social circle here, I can see everyone saying that they're being underpaid. Why do you feel like interpreters have this sensation that they're being underpaid?
So comparisons is the thief of joy. It is not that people are underpaid. It's so I got paid horribly 7 years ago, then very much higher like 2 years later, then significantly lower after, then somewhat higher, than lower. There is markets. It's like I will never look at a job. So the numbers I see people complaining about, I didn't get 17% of the worst number I've seen. That's how bad the first job I had was. So I've never seen a number that people were complaining about, and I was like,
I,
that's
I
bad.
love your exact number, 17%. That's awesome. I have to say
I
though, like
just
it's
made the joke to my
perspective
wife.
and, yeah, and fairness, right? Like everybody says fair. But what I want to I want people to understand is there is no such thing as fair. There's only what Mohammed said, which is supply and demand. Companies are going to do what they do, which is try to make profit. Interpreters, if you are connected, and this is why we say join the Interpreter Hub, and you get to know things, right? Then you can make choices that benefit you. But Mohammed, I want to be clear, and I want to ask this: all the rates you were given and that you worked for, did anybody force you to take them, or was it your choice?
It is always my choice. The only thing that would be referred to as forcing could be desperation.
Oh, 100%. People need jobs everywhere, right? Like everywhere. I don't care what country you're in. You need a job. We all have bills. We all have to eat, right? 100%, right? But as soon as you could, you found something better. You
Yes.
empowered yourself, right? Which is the whole point of this interview, this project for that Mateos and I are building, is because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can go through this by learning from others, right? Do you have to touch the stove and say, "Oh, that's hot" yourself? Or you can be like, "Oh, I just watched Mohammed get burned. I'm not going to do the same thing," right? But on the other side, and why I keep like hammering home the question about like why is the competition going up? What I unfortunately see is I see so many third-party companies that are starting up. They have no tech, no system of their own, and they want to give that 20 and take that 80 for themselves, right? They were interpreters and they want to turn around and do the very thing they're complaining about, right? So I gotta say, karma. Treat others as you want to be treated, right? Which is why I like your philosophy, and I don't know that everybody shares this philosophy, but you take a small percentage in a large volume, right? Which is great. Now, our time is coming to an end, so I do want to give you a plug. How can interpreters reach out to you and Interprepedia, and what interpreters do you want to reach out to you? Because you might be saturated with Arabic and be like, God, no, please, no more, because the clients aren't asking for it. As much as I would love to have 150,000 more Arabic CVs to sort through, I don't have that demand. What do you have demand for, and how should people reach out to you?
Usually, people at this point, I think people have every possible way to reach out to me known to man. I
Yeah.
got a letter to my home address, so
What?
I doubt there's a way people don't
Don't do
have.
that.
They can
Don't do
reach me
that. Do
by
not stalk
email.
Mohammed, right? His wife
Yeah,
probably didn't like that. He probably doesn't like that, right?
Oh, hold on, Mohammed. You said that somebody
LinkedIn
sent you a
or
letter to your house?
yeah. And I mean, it's not this one, thank God. No one knows this address, but to my home in Egypt, the one I was born and raised in. But yeah, that was hilarious. On a different note, people can find me by my email. Please don't use LinkedIn because everyone is, and I'm human. I don't think it. If I read every message, I will need a couple of lifetimes.
you'll do nothing
I,
else. That's
Understand.
100% correct.
Yeah.
So, what's the email? Let's give you a plug so that people can send it to the right place. And just
oh,
know that
it's
if you send him a LinkedIn, he's going to ignore you.
Yeah, people can use the contact at Lnterprepedia.com. That one, essentially, I have an inbox for that where I view and filter through. People can use my personal one. If you have it, you can use it. I'm not gonna argue. It's the personal one. I mean the business personal one. Everyone has it at this point, so I'm not even gonna try to hide it.
Okay.
It has enough filters on it that it can't get saturated badly anyway.
Okay. Cool.
I do want to mention one thing before we leave that just struck me during this discussion and is very important, considering the supply and demand part. Um, Remember how I said when I started my first job, I was very excited, I was very motivated, etc. So, a very big thing that interpreters today don't notice is that they're like, oh, those new interpreters are taking our jobs, they're getting the same pay, blah, blah, blah. The market. Yeah, they're using the same entry level you did. And then they're doing it at a better level. They're more focused. They're way happier. And it shows up in their quality. Meanwhile, I have seen for a very long time, like, because as I told you, I worked in person. So I was surrounded by like 400 people at all times. And many of them were older than me in the business. Everybody's
I
who's
see that gray
older.
hair, though, man. Come on.
Yeah. I'm 30 now. It's surprising. Um, I see those people and they're treating it like a 9 to 5. The reality is, interpreters who sit and just take the call, like, hello, my name is blah, blah, blah. You're not providing something that a new interpreter can't for 90% of what you do. And that person is doing it with a better tone, better quality. They're more excited by every quality review they get. They get much better with every single one. If they get a bad review, they take it a lot more seriously. An old interpreter would fight you. They will not improve. Most of the time, they will be like, no, 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 I said it right. You just didn't pay attention or something. And a newer person is actually much more likely to enjoy what they do and do it better nowadays than just like I was, just like most of us were at the beginning. Then
I,
it
I
turns
think
into a
that's
nine
every
to five.
profession. And I 100% agree. You've always got to find the joy in what you do. I've said this for years. If you don't enjoy what you do, find something else, right?
Yes.
You've
The
got to move
world
on
is
to something
free.
you do enjoy.
All right, Mohammed, we have a few questions for you from our audience. I hope you don't mind answering them. So Diego is asking here, Mohammed, do you see non-US based interpreters rates continue going down for this 2025? And what can I do to start getting direct clients and avoid abusive BPOs? That's the question from Diego.
So the last part is avoid abusive BBOs. That's the answer. But for the first part, I don't know how the market's gonna behave. Like during COVID, everything went up for a while, then everything went down. During the Russia-Ukraine situation, Russian interpreter rates sky high because of the sanctions. It's a market. Can you expect what's going to happen to Nvidia tomorrow?
Not at all.
No,
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea.
All right. We have one more question here from Wase Nadia from Kenya. She's asking you, would you be willing to train someone or to mentorship someone who wants to start their own company?
I've done it. It's good, but at this point where I'm running the whole ship alone, if I put 9 hours a day in training a group of people, they better be speaking a very tribal language. Otherwise, it's too much work right now. It requires 40 hours at least of being there, and then all the hours outside. For me, it's difficult.
I think I understood that question in a different way. Mateos, it sounds like they're asking for Mohammed to teach them how to start their own company as not an
Yes.
interpreter, but as to hire
Oh,
other
Yeah.
interpreters, which let me just say from my point of view, you're asking someone to create their own competition. So what
Yes.
value would you bring to Mohammed in order for him to want to muddy the waters?
even if I were to answer that truthfully, I would have to be very honest. 90% of what I have today in terms of the company is luck, and the rest is that 10% is the effort I put in. If I didn't get to sit across the table from my first client, I would have never gotten the second. So until you get that first client, yes, that comes with some effort, but there's a lot of luck in it. And so that you cannot reproduce.
All
Well,
right.
I've heard luck defined as where preparation meets opportunity,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
So you were prepared for that
I was.
opportunity.
We have one
I
more
was indeed.
question here. Yeah, this question is a little different, but our friend MD Aman, I think that's how we pronounce his name, he's asking you, for my language pair, which is Bengali, the call flow is very low compared to the last 3 or 4 months. Is there any possibility of it returning to normal? A very specific question.
So when you say last 3 or 4 months, are you talking January with a new business day off and December? If you wanted to return to that bad, then bad for you. But I mean, generally, if your call flow is reducing for any number of reasons, it could be that the supply has increased or the demand has reduced, just the regular market saturation, or it could be that any other things. It could be just a client renewing their contract and then putting everything on hold. There's a lot that goes in the background for why things change. So the only thing you can do is adapt.
All right.
That is awesome advice, right? Is there anything else you want to share with us before we end the episode, Mohammed?
Um, there's one thing I do want to share because you did like it's not on the interpreting side of things, it's more on the business side of things. Um, I do a lot of recruitment, and while this is not the core of what we do as interpreters or as companies, it's what gets you in.
Yes.
So for all the interpreters out there, you really need to understand who you're applying to work for. If you're applying for a company that gets millions of CVs, they have an applicant tracking system, which means your CV is going to be rejected if you're not prepared to prepare the CV to make it past those filters. You have to do your own due diligence. However, if you're applying for a BPO or a third party, etc., meaning there's a human who's going to read your CV, you don't want a 20-page CV. You want something cut to the chase, and white space is not optional. It gives the eye room to breathe.
That's what I tell everyone.
So understand that your email to a person cannot be 300 pages long. If all your email says to a third party is, I'm an Arabic interpreter, 3 years experience, here's my CV, nothing else, to a PPO or a third party, someone who's going to read that email, you've done your due diligence. On the other hand, if you're applying to a larger entity like a direct client, no, make a CV that starts where it should, meaning if once it makes it past the ATS, a person's going to read it, make sure that the first part, which is where the recruiter is going to look, is breathable and gets to the point, and then fill the CV with what's going to make it past the system. You have to understand that if you're not going to make it through the door, it doesn't matter how good you are.
100%. We call
That makes
those
a lot of
cover
sense.
letters,
Yes.
right? Like either email or your cover letter should highlight what you want them to see. Highlight. They don't really care that you started interpreting in 1986, 3 months after you were
Yeah.
born, right? They
Yeah.
want to know certain things. So highlight that, direct it towards Mohammed or a certain person, right? Make it personable and make yourself stand out. That is great advice.
I don't think I have much else myself, but if you have questions, shoot them.
Well, we have to end the episode today. We'd love to have you back on in the future because there's so much we can talk about. We can
A
talk about
lot.
AI. We can talk about industry trends. We can talk about competition in the market more and rates, all the fun stuff that we kind of touched on, but we really didn't dive into. So, if you're willing, we'd love to have you back on at a future episode. And we hope everyone enjoyed this. Mateus?
Yeah, I have some final words. Mohamed, thank you very much for joining us here today. You were very famous, especially between the Brazilian and the Spanish and Arabic community. Everybody was like, hey, Mohamed will be there. I can't believe that. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We really look forward to have you here again in the future because we have, like Mark said, so much to discuss yet. And one episode is not enough for that. So we look forward to having you here again anytime soon.
Well, I would love to, and do let me know. And yeah, we'll discuss a lot of things, including AI for sure. But as a closing statement, it's not taking our jobs anytime soon.
Nice.
But that's it.
That's an awesome teaser. So we'll get into that. We thank everyone for watching. Please, as Mateo said, share this. Mohamed, we take it as a personal favor. If you'd share this with your interpreter network, that would just be
Will do.
amazing, right? We'll get this posted and we will have more episodes in the future. We hope you enjoyed it and we would love your feedback. So if you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, you can find us at interpreterhub.com. Very easy. We're on LinkedIn and we would love your feedback. Thank you so much. And Mateus, any
Very
closing?
much. See you guys soon. And
Have a
again,
good day.
don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. Everybody have a great day. See you in the next episode.